Picture this. September 13th, 1948, Bonneville Salt Flats. A man wearing nothing but a bathing suit and a shower cap is lying flat on top of a motorcycle, screaming across the white salt at over 150 miles per hour. That motorcycle? The Vincent Black Shadow. And that moment, that's when the legend was born. I'm going to make a bold claim today. Not just bold, some of you are probably going to think I've lost my mind. But stick with me, because I'm going to prove to you why the Vincent Black Shadow isn't just a great motorcycle. It's the greatest motorcycle ever built, period. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another nostalgic trip down memory lane, let me tell you something. This bike wasn't just fast for its time. It was so far ahead of everything else that nothing could touch it for 25 years. Think about that. In 1948, this machine was doing things that motorcycles wouldn't catch up to until the 1970s. So buckle up, because we're going deep into what made this British masterpiece so special that even Hunter S. Thompson said riding one at top speed would almost certainly kill you. And trust me, coming from Thompson, that's practically a love letter. Before the legend, there was rebellion. Every legend has an origin story, and the Black Shadow's beginning was pure rebellion. February 1948. Philip Vincent, the company founder, had an idea. He wanted to build the fastest production motorcycle the world had ever seen. Simple enough, right? Except there was one problem. Frank Walker, the managing director, said absolutely not, refused to authorize it, shut it down completely. So what did Vincent's chief engineer, Phil Irving, do? He went behind Walker's back. Together with racer George Brown, Irving secretly built 2 prototype bikes in what was basically a basement operation. They were gambling their careers on this machine. On February 16th, 1948, they finished the first prototype. They handed it over to their test rider, and he took it out on the road. When he came back, he had one simple report: 122 miles per hour on a production motorcycle. In 1948, Walker changed his tune real quick after that. But here's what I love about this story. This wasn't some corporate committee designing a motorcycle. This was engineers who believed in something so much they were willing to risk their jobs for it. That kind of passion, you can't fake it. And you can feel it in every part of this machine. The Vincent Black Shadow was announced to the world as the world's fastest production motorcycle. And unlike most marketing claims, this one was actually true. A machine born in post-war Britain. To understand why the Black Shadow matters, you need to understand the world it was born into. 1948, Britain is still digging out from World War II. Steel is rationed. Materials are scarce. The country is broke. Most motorcycle companies are building simple, practical machines just to get people moving again. Nothing fancy, nothing extravagant. And then Vincent shows up with this. They built approximately 1,700 Black Shadows between 1948 and 1955. That's it. Each one was hand-assembled in Stevenage, Hertfordshire. And I mean hand-assembled. Workers were hand-selecting parts for tighter tolerances. They were fitting bearings and major engine parts individually. This wasn't a production line churning out identical machines. This was craftsmanship. Think about the nerve it took to do this. Britain is rationed. Money is tight. And Vincent decides to build the most expensive, most complex, most ambitious motorcycle anyone had ever attempted. But here's the beautiful irony. Those wartime material shortages actually forced them to innovate in ways that made the bike better. They couldn't waste steel on a traditional frame, so they came up with something revolutionary. We'll get to that in a minute. The Black Shadow represented everything Britain wanted to be in those post-war years. Innovative, bold, uncompromising, and absolutely world-beating. Britain owned speed in 1952, and the Black Shadow was the crown jewel. The engine that rewrote the rulebook. Let's talk about that 998cc V-twin engine, because this is where things get interesting. Most motorcycles in 1948 were making maybe 25, 30 horsepower if you were lucky. The Black Shadow, 55 horsepower from an engine that had to run on terrible post-war fuel with compression limited to just 7.3 How did they do it? Obsession. Phil Irving and his team went through that engine like surgeons. They hand-selected parts for tighter tolerances. They blended and polished the engine's ports to improve airflow. They gas-flowed the cylinder heads. They polished the connecting rod. They installed larger carburetors and special comet cams. Every single component was optimized. Nothing was left to chance. But here's what really set it apart. This wasn't a race engine that happened to be in a production bike. This was a production engine that performed like a race engine. You could actually ride this thing on the street day in and day out, and it wouldn't shake itself apart. The engine was finished in black. Not chrome, not polished aluminum, black. Philip Vincent insisted on it. While every other motorcycle company was polishing and chroming everything in sight, Vincent went the opposite direction. That black engine became iconic. You could spot a Black Shadow from a mile away, and mounted on the engine case, a speedometer that went up to 150 miles per hour on a production motorcycle. In 1948, that wasn't optimism, that was a promise. When the engine became the frame. Now we get to the really clever part. The part that makes engineers lose their minds even today. Vincent didn't build a motorcycle frame and then bolt an engine into it. That's what everyone else did. Instead, they used the engine itself as the frame. Think about that for a second. The engine cases were designed as stressed members of the chassis. The rear suspension bolted directly to the engine. The front suspension attached to the engine. The whole motorcycle was built around that V-twin as the central structure. This wasn't just innovative. Yeah, this was borderline radical, and it worked. First, it saved weight. The Black Shadow weighed 458 pounds, relatively light for such a powerful machine. Second, it saved steel, which was still rationed in post-war Britain. But third, and most importantly, it created a motorcycle that handled better than anything else on the road. Without a traditional frame flexing and twisting, the Black Shadow felt planted, solid, connected to the road in a way that other motorcycles just weren't. The rear suspension used a triangulated rear frame member with dual spring boxes and a central damper. It was called a cantilever rear suspension, and it was decades ahead of its time. Smooth, controlled, responsive. Up front, Vincent used their patented girdrolic fork. It looked strange, like two girders instead of conventional forks, but it worked beautifully, stable, progressive, and tough as nails. And the brakes? While everyone else was still figuring out how to make one brake shoe work properly, Vincent put 4 brake shoes on each wheel, 2 on each side, front and rear. This was before disc brakes were even a concept. The stopping power was phenomenal. This frameless design, this whole engineering philosophy influenced motorcycle design for decades. You can still see its DNA in modern bikes today. The day the world paid attention, September 13th, 1948. Let's go back to where we started. Raleigh Free was a test rider and racer, and he'd brought a Vincent to the Bonneville Salt Flats with one goal: break the American motorcycle speed record. He'd been making runs all day, getting up to 147 miles per hour, but his leathers kept tearing from the wind resistance at that speed. So for the final run, Free made a decision that would create one of the most famous photographs in motorcycle history. He stripped down to a bathing suit and a borrowed pair of sneakers. He put on a shower cap to keep his hair from whipping around. Then he laid flat on top of the Vincent, stretched out like Superman, and pinned the throttle. On a production motorcycle. That record stood for years. And that photograph, the nearly naked man stretched out on that black Vincent against the white salt flats, became iconic. It's been reproduced thousands of times. It's in museums. It's on posters in garages all over the world. But here's what makes it even more impressive. That wasn't even a standard Black Shadow. It was actually the very first competition spec Black Lightning prototype. But the point stands. Vincent built a machine capable of those speeds and put it into production. Think about the confidence that takes. They weren't just claiming to be the fastest. They were proving it on the salt, in public, with witnesses and timing equipment and cameras rolling. That's the Vincent difference. No smoke and mirrors. No marketing nonsense. Just pure documented performance. Hunter S. Thompson's death machine. Hunter S. Thompson owned a lot of motorcycles in his life, but there was only one he wrote about like it was a living, breathing thing of danger and beauty: the Vincent Black Shadow. Thompson's most famous quote about the bike has become part of motorcycle lore. If you rode the Black Shadow at top speed for any length of time, you would almost certainly die. That is why there are not many life members of the Vincent Black Shadow Society. Now, coming from most people, that would sound like criticism, but coming from Hunter S. Thompson, that's the highest praise imaginable. He understood what the Vincent represented. This wasn't a motorcycle designed to keep you safe. This wasn't a motorcycle designed to be sensible. This was a motorcycle designed to be the absolute fastest, most powerful thing on two wheels, and if you couldn't handle it, that was your problem. Thompson wrote about the Vincent in several of his works, most famously in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. He elevated it beyond just a machine. In his hands, it became a symbol of a certain kind of American outlaw spirit. Ironic, since it was British, that refused to compromise, refused to play it safe, and refused to acknowledge limits. The Vincent Black Shadow wasn't just fast, it was dangerous, and Thompson loved it for exactly that reason. That's the kind of cultural impact we're talking about. This motorcycle transcended its own category and became a cultural icon, referenced in literature, discussed in artistic circles, and mythologized in ways that few machines ever achieve. When engineering became art, here's something most people don't know. The Vincent Black Shadow is in the Museum of Modern Art's collection. Let that sink in for a second. MoMA, one of the most prestigious art museums in the world, and they have a Vincent Black Shadow. A curator at the museum explained it perfectly. They were not trying to make something beautiful. They were trying to make something that did what it was supposed to do better than anything and anyone else ever did. And in that pursuit of pure function, they accidentally created art. Look at a Black Shadow. Really look at it. Those parallel headers coming off the engine, the visible pushrod tubes, the delicate cooling fins, the Vincent stamp on the cases, the proportions of the whole machine. It's beautiful because every single element has a purpose. There's no decoration, no fake chrome, no styling flourishes, just function, refined to its absolute essence. That's what great design is. Not adding things until it looks right, removing things until nothing unnecessary remains. The Black Shadow achieved that. Every curve, every component, every detail exists because it makes the motorcycle work better. And in achieving perfect function, they created something that still looks stunning 75 years later. Modern motorcycles look dated after 10 years. The styling goes out of fashion, the proportions look wrong, but the Black Shadow, it looks timeless. It looks right because it was never designed to look good. It was designed to be good. The beauty was a side effect. The first superbike. Here's where we need to talk about a controversial claim. The Vincent Black Shadow was the world's first superbike. Most people give that title to the 1969 Honda CB750, and I understand why. The CB750 was revolutionary, no question, but it wasn't first. A superbike isn't just about power, it's about the total package. It's about performance that exceeds everything else on the market. It's about technology that pushes boundaries. It's about creating an experience that separates it from every other motorcycle. By that definition, the Black Shadow was a superbike 20 years before the CB750 existed. In 1948, the Black Shadow was faster than anything else on the road by a margin that's hard to overstate. It wasn't 10% faster. It was in a completely different league. The performance gap between the Black Shadow and its nearest competitor was bigger than the gap between a Honda CB750 and the bikes that came before it. The technology, frameless construction, advanced suspension, 4 brake shoes per wheel, hand-built engines with tolerances that wouldn't be standard in production bikes for decades. The experience? Hunter S. Thompson compared it to riding a death machine. That's a superbike. The Black Shadow set a standard that took a quarter century for anyone to match. That's not just a fast motorcycle, that's dominance. That's supremacy. So yes, I'm making the claim. The Vincent Black Shadow was the world's first superbike, and it set the template for every superbike that came after. Why the greatest collectors still choose it? Jay Leno has one of the most extensive motorcycle collections in the world. Hundreds of bikes, every significant manufacturer, every important model, rare prototypes, race bikes, custom builds. You name it, he probably owns it. And when asked what his favorite motorcycle is, he says the Vincent Black Shadow. Not a modern superbike with 200 horsepower, not a rare Italian exotic, not some $1 million prototype. The Vincent. Leno owns multiple examples. He's talked about them on his show, in interviews, in magazine articles. He rides them regularly, and he's explained why they're special in a way that I think cuts to the heart of what makes the Black Shadow the greatest. According to Leno, it's about the total experience. The sound, the feel, the connection between rider and machine, the knowledge that you're riding something that changed motorcycling forever. Modern bikes are faster, obviously, they're more reliable, they're easier to ride, they're more comfortable, but they're also more isolated, more clinical, more safe. The Black Shadow requires your attention, your skill, your respect. It rewards good riding and punishes mistakes. And that creates a connection that modern motorcycles, with all their electronic aids and safety systems, simply can't match. The legacy that never dies. Let's talk money for a minute, because it tells us something important about how the world values the Vincent Black Shadow. In April 2021, a 1953 Black Shadow sold for $165,000. A pristine 1950 Series C model is worth around $100,000 today. And in 2018, a Vincent Black Lightning, the racing version of the Black Shadow, sold for $929,000, setting a record for the most expensive motorcycle ever sold at auction. Think about that, nearly $1 million for a motorcycle built in the 1950s. But here's what's really interesting. Those prices keep climbing. The Vincent isn't losing value like most old motorcycles, it's gaining value. The Vincent Black Shadow wasn't just ahead of its time. It represented a peak of engineering and craftsmanship that we've arguably never returned to. Modern motorcycles are better in measurable ways. They're faster, more reliable, more efficient, but they're also mass-produced on computer-controlled assembly lines by robots. They're designed by committees. They're built to price points and market segments. The Black Shadow was built by engineers who believed they could create the greatest motorcycle ever made. And damn the consequences. It was hand-assembled by craftsmen who took pride in their work. It was designed without compromise or concern for practicality. And the result? A motorcycle that 75 years later is still considered by many to be the pinnacle of the art. Only 1,700 were ever made. Each one is a piece of history. Each one represents a moment when human ambition and engineering excellence aligned perfectly. The Vincent Black Shadow influenced every significant performance motorcycle that came after it. The frameless design, the V-twin configuration, the focus on power to weight ratio, the integration of advanced suspension and braking, all of it traces back to that black British masterpiece. So is the Vincent Black Shadow the greatest motorcycle ever built? I started this video making that claim, and now, 17 minutes later, I'm going to stand by it. Not because it's the fastest, it isn't anymore. Not because it's the most reliable, modern bikes have that locked down. Not because it's the most practical, it never was. The Vincent Black Shadow is the greatest motorcycle ever built because it represents something we've lost in modern motorcycle design. The willingness to push boundaries without concern for the consequences. The commitment to excellence over everything else. The belief that engineering can be art. And 75 years on, here we are, still talking about it, still in awe of it, still trying to match what a small British company achieved in 1948. That's why the Vincent Black Shadow is the greatest motorcycle ever built, and I don't think we'll ever see it again.